Hi, welcome to another marketing, communications, and business strategy developed for a Sri Lankan company. I'm Shaveen Bandaranaike. In 2016, Smart Travel approached and commissioned us to develop a marketing, communication, and a business strategy for a new taxi aggregator service, something that would compete with a local company known as PickMe as well as an international rival known as Uber. Before we proceed, let's outline the context in which this company was formed. Smart Travel was in the business of importing and selling of meters for taxis, specifically three-wheelers. In the past 5 years, metered taxis or three-wheelers have become a prevalent sight within the Colombo and Sri Lankan streets. However, they wanted to now get into the business of taxi aggregation while leveraging on the sales that they had already done in relation to the taxi meters. Their aggregator service was to use these meters, which were considered the most accurate on the market, and leverage that on the GPS compatibility of an app that they were going to launch in 2016. Having said that, let's consider the brief. Smart Travel intended to launch an all-new taxi aggregator service. With over 3,000 meters already dispatched among a Western province-heavy demographic, Smart Travel wished to launch this service in August 2016. It must be noted that they did not have a particular name, brand ideology, or positioning. Their target was to have 1,000 supplier sign-ups monthly. This included three-wheelers and ordinary taxis as well as 50,000 plus app downloads. They had allocated a budget of around 3 million per month, which spanned over 12 months. Their primary objectives, however, were twofold. On the one hand, they wanted to generate supplier interest, and on the other hand, aggressively market it to consumers, both who are local as well as coming in from abroad. Having considered this brief, we wanted to identify several insights before proceeding onto our strategy and finally execution. And we felt the best way to do so was to actually talk to and identify the actual problems and needs of the supplier on the first hand. For this purpose, we consulted with Sumit Vitanagi, a 32-year-old former PickMe driver. Intrinsically, Sumit is in fact our transport manager. We recruited him about a year ago for our transportation purposes, and having a monthly income coming in from the company, he decided to leave his PickMe ad hoc business. When speaking to him, we identified certain concerns that three-wheel as well as taxi drivers have in Sri Lanka. Firstly, the concept of metered vehicles or metered taxis is in fact an urban niche. It's something which you see in Colombo, Kandy and certain other developed cities within Sri Lanka. But once you go outstation, this is not the case. There are discrepancies, however, between the actual distances covered as well as that which is indicated by non-metered GPS-based systems. When considering the metered system, which is connected directly to the vehicle, versus PickMe or other aggregator services GPS systems, the GPS indication in fact is less in terms of distance than the metered system. This was considered to be a problem because it eats into the profit of the three-wheel as well as the taxi drivers. Drivers aren't against direct bank remittances. This was a conception that we had once we found out that the process by which Smart Travel intended to create their system was to pay drivers on a weekly or a monthly basis directly to the bank account. This was not a problem for three-wheel drivers such as Sumit because they predominantly use debit and other types of cards for their transactions, and it is in fact easier for them to go to an ATM and withdraw rather than having cash at hand, where they felt that expenditure is more that way. When distance to the pickup location is greater than the trip distance itself, drivers were deterred by this. What is meant by this is, if the trip itself is stipulated to be 2 kilometers, but the closest driver is about 3 kilometers away, chances are they will not be forthcoming to come to pick you up because it will be a loss from their end. However, services like PickMe have urged their drivers not to request from customers where exactly they are going, nor to refuse any hire. At the time the research was conducted, PickMe, which is the main competitor that Smart Travel were targeting, were in fact going through a process of charging a percentage per hire from the drivers. This came under heavy criticism by the drivers as well, and the whole concept of per hire percentage was seen as a windfall for the aggregator, and when coupled with the daily payment that has to be made, deterred a lot of potential drivers. The perception of network among drivers was key to building loyalty. The more drivers in a system, the more confident others are to join. The whole concept of a down payment for the system is also considered too high. Smart Travel at the time relied on their meters to be implemented in order for their aggregator service to function. Therefore, if a three-wheel driver wishes to partner up with the service that they were starting, they would first need to purchase a meter from Smart Travel, which is integrated with the app. But this number, at that time over 20,000 rupees, was considered too high of an investment. From the concerns that we have identified, there were three main elements that we needed to tackle. Number 3. Actual distance versus indicated distance. Many three-wheel drivers felt that GPS-based systems profited the customer more than themselves, because whereas the meter would show the actual and the direct distance, the indicated distance in an app-based system was not accurate, and sometimes, more often than not, less than the actual distance. Number 2. The pickup distance being greater than the trip distance itself. And the number one reason for being deterred by these services was the 5% per hire charge plus the daily charge. Based on these findings, we decided to strategize our approach, our tactical campaign, into two separate segments and approach them individually. In light of this, we identified that we needed to create a marketing communications as well as a business strategy for both the supplier as well as the customer. Let's look at the former first. The objectives were fourfold. First, we needed to create awareness. Next, to convince them to join, making this service by Smart Travel the first preference among others, building loyalty, and finally retaining them from going to any other service or ditching our one. So what are the challenges that we would be facing? Number 1 would be the competitors in the market, primarily of which being Pick Me. Second, the financial barriers for system acquisition, refusal of drivers to join. Some drivers were quite loyal to certain services while others didn't want to join any service whatsoever. Finally, identifying high yield contact points. So what was the approach that we took? On the one hand, we needed to identify existing suppliers, people who are aware of Smart Travel or have purchased the meter and quite happy with it. This is the 3,000 plus strong distributed network that Smart Travel already has, made up of three-wheel drivers as well as other taxi drivers. Next, the new suppliers, those who might not be aware of the service whatsoever, not be recruited by any other service either. And finally, competitor suppliers, those who are already with Pick Me or some other service. That was an outline of the supplier. In order for this to be fruitful, we need as many customers spending money. And on top of that, the more customers that are part of this, the more energized a supplier or a driver would be to join the service as well. So the approach that we took in relation to customer engagement is firstly, and most importantly, to generate visibility. We needed to be everywhere. So the marketing and communications campaign needed to be based on getting top of mind recall and generating visibility. Next, to increase downloads, we needed to push the application significantly. The first usage advantage and something to be provided to the customer that no one else would provide. And finally, to continue repeated usage, we needed to have the visibility in place. Based on this premise, we wanted to develop our big idea. So the communication that we wanted to go ahead with was in relation to the supplier. We wanted to communicate the accuracy of the meter versus any GPS-based system, the affordability of enrollment, the widespread reach of the service, how many people are actually part and parcel of it, the incentives for joining, promoting, as well as being with the service, finally, the low recurrent as well as the island-wide reachability. In relation to the customer, we wanted to tap into what's most important to them. Therefore, the constant availability of vehicles being one of the major gripes of the new and emerging services. Safety and reassurance, ease of use, the honest brand promise of accuracy, as well as the very accuracy of the meter itself. You're paying for exactly the distance that you're traveling. Now that we had identified who we needed to target, as well as how we needed to target them, we needed to create a brand image and a name that communicates exactly our brand promise. While most of the competitors were talking about distances, the number of people, we wanted to actually focus on what's most important to both parties, as in the supplier and the consumer, as well as a positive term that defines exactly what you would want from a service like this. Everyone spoke about speed, convenience, and pickup processes. But we identified through our insight that what was most important to anyone, be it the supplier or the consumer, was to get to their destination. What was most important was arrival. Therefore, we decided to create the brand image and the name itself as AVA, which in Sinhalese refers to arrived. In line with that, our tagline was to be AVA, always available.